What up, though? Ghost University. I'm going to continue with my series I decided to do about the tyranny of experts, lying deceivers, and secrets. And so my first piece right here has Mark Twain, a little quote from Mark Twain. He said, I've showed this in my other videos as well. He said, in religion and politics, people's beliefs and convictions are in almost every case gotten at second hand. Folks just repeating what somebody else said, right? And without examination from authorities who have not themselves examined the questions and issues, but have taken them at second hand from other non-examiners whose opinions about them were not worth a brass farthing. Now, isn't it just so bizarre that Mark Twain said that? In other words, saying we should all be more vigilant to vet and or scrutinize or look over and prove what somebody else has said about a particular topic. Okay? And so that is the quote I'll be sticking with through more videos that I use as well. And so moving on to my first article, I have an article from Forbes that says why experts always seem to get it wrong. And the reason that they seem to almost always get it wrong is because nobody's checking the information. And even if it's a peer-reviewed paper or peer-reviewed journal, a lot of those people aren't checking either. They're just going along to get along. And we need to be careful of that sort of thing because there are people indeed that will go back and look over the research that has been done. But even then, somebody might come along and still agree with whatever research, but there could be somebody else who comes along and say, well, that research that those other guys did was completely wrong and they're lying to us. And there's been a lot of that lately, and it's made a lot of people understand that experts and the world of experts is filled with lying deceivers. So I'd like to talk about quickly here in this article, because I've got a few articles to go over and I wasn't trying to make this second part of my videos too long, about Thomas Malthus. He was an economist, and he predicted that overpopulation would lead to war and famine. In 1968, at 4 billion people, experts published The Population Bomb and Limits to Growth and predicted the same thing. What they mean is the book The Population Bomb, right? Because after the war, they imagined people came home, or not people, but men came home and were having sex with their wives and or girlfriends. But World War II lasted a little while. I'm not sure exactly how many of these men really came home to wives and girlfriends that perhaps, let's say, were pregnant already. A terrible way to look at it, but it's the truth. The population bomb and limits to growth go hand in hand, because if the population grows and there is only so much we can grow due to the limits of the resources Earth has to offer people, right? How many resources are available for Earth to grow with how many people? And how well and efficiently can we grow due to the fact of the resources available compared to the population? So it says today in 2014 there are over 7 billion people on the planet. Nevertheless, Global poverty and violence are at all-time lows. Even current admissions are dropping, at least in the U.S. It seems that the experts were mistaken. And let me add, in China, they thought that they were having too many babies. And so they instituted the one child policy. And if you had more than one child, that they would take measures to uh, reduce your family, however they saw fit to do that. You know, you went to the doctor pregnant, and you might leave without the baby before the baby was full term, and they took your baby for whatever reason. But imagine that in China, they're changing that. So imagine they took your baby, and then 10 months later, they called you and said, hey, we've been mistaken on what the population of China looks like so we can build our society effectively. Meaning your younger base should be able to support the older base. And if not, then you're in trouble. Because who's going to help out all the old people if there aren't enough young people to do so? Even if it's taxes and whatever else they need to do to support the old people or Social Security, whatever it is. What do you do to make it so the younger generation can hold up the older generation? I'm not sure exactly what happens, but I wouldn't be too pleased if you guys just took my baby and now you're calling me and asking me to have another one. And you're saying that, well, maybe we do need men to be with women more and have these babies. It's insane, but it actually happened. Because now China is indeed, after the one-child policy, asking people to have more babies. Imagine that. So the government was wrong, and they killed babies, and they made women feel a particular way about the babies they were having. And now they want society to change and go the opposite way. Not sure how well that works. But anyway, it also says here, again, because after the population bomb and everything, that the world seems to be okay. And continuing in the reading, it says, in a sense, that shouldn't be surprising. There will always be a wealth of experts arguing a number of sides to any given issue, and most will be proved wrong, right? Because that's just how it goes, right? And so there was a man named Richard Feynman who was eccentric. He was a young scientist, and he eventually decided to go join a samba band in Brazil and lecture. Okay, that's just what he decided to do with his life. But when he returned to the U.S., the physics world was engaged in a great debate about the decay of some obscure subatomic particle, and he found himself completely unable to follow it. His sister suggested that instead of listening to experts, he try to figure it out for himself. That's exactly what he did. And so he dug a little further. And what he found out was there's a fundamental error in the review of the material. So he was like, somebody's made a grave error because this just isn't adding up. And his conclusion was, apparently, none of the great physicists arguing the issue had actually read the original paper. That goes back to what I showed everybody about Mark Twain, who said people aren't doing their research. They're just regurgitating what somebody else said and making it sound cool and says, hey, well, they said so and they must have done the work. No, they didn't. And he says, they just assumed that someone somewhere had vetted it. So they went on with their debate, oblivious to the fact that they were wasting their time on gibberish. Feynman never considered himself an expert, but likened himself to a confused ape. which was one reason he saw further and more clearly than everyone else. He's not confused. He's just looking for the real answer. A confused ape just means he was more observant than everybody else and he wanted the real answers. If he's confused, he wanted the real answers. He's not confused because he's a stupid ape. He's confused because he's looking at the material and saying, who said this is true? And why are we following this type of stuff? Okay? The next part of the article goes into the confidence trap. And what I really want to concentrate on here is that when an expert has a particular field that they're involved in, it makes them less able to see the entire picture. All right? And so when they do that, it's because technically their knowledge is limited. And it says here, much like in the first article, it mentions Tetlock, that says that the experts' predictions were no better than the flipping of a coin. Okay? Just flip a coin. Who cares at that point, right? We'll just flip a coin and we'll find the answers. All right? But it also says that further, he found that pundits who specialized in a particular field tended to perform worse than those whose knowledge was more general. Just like I said, if you know more about a subject's nuances, okay? Nuances is what we need to really be able to figure out a problem. Problem solving involves nuances. If you just know one particular thing, then how are you going to know about the nuances of other tidbits of information? Well, you're not. And it also says here that when you're only knowledgeable about one big particular thing, like the hedgehogs are, then that idea that you just know one big thing is counterintuitive. Okay? It says, it hardly seems possible, but it's true. The reason lies in the confidence of predictions. Specialists with a deep knowledge of a particular subject tend to not to incorporate information outside the domain, which makes a cleaner, which makes for a cleaner, more definitive storyline. Right, because there are more things to consider in most situations than just having blinders on. Like you have to take the blinders off. You need your peripheral vision so you can see what's on the side of you, or maybe even a rear view mirror to see what's in back of you to make a better decision. It says foxes with their broad-based knowledge are less sure of themselves. They also tend to be right more often. Confusion, more often than not, trumps certainty. Because if you're confused and you're looking at the entire problem, you'll come up with more reasons why certain things are happening. It's just the nature of someone who has no specialty but is aware of many things and many problems in a situation. Again, we're speaking about nuances, okay? Nuances. The nuances, if you can break those down, you make for a better thinker than someone who's just concentrated on one particular thing.